Hello, everybody, and welcome to the LeanTossup Call of Duty League podcast. We are up to Major 4, Week 2. I am joined, as always, by my co-host, CDLMetrics. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. Yeah, it was an interesting weekend of COD last weekend. I feel like we got some surprising results, which we'll talk about as we go through this week's matches. But yeah, I feel like last weekend was one of the more interesting ones when you look at the grand scheme of the entire season, just based on some of the results. We saw some team changes, the first of those. Yeah, a lot to talk about and excited as always.
Yeah, it was some really good games on. It was so nice to be back to 3-4-4. That was it's been so long of 2-3-3. You finally felt this game sucks. Okay, guess what? There's going to be another game coming right up, so it doesn't matter. That was a nice feeling to have. But yeah, moving on. News of the week. Yeah, there's not really news. I will say one thing that kind of came out today that we didn't put in here. There's now a rumor. There was basically someone found potential HTML code on the World Cup World Cup of Esports. I can't remember what it's called, but it's the World Cup thing in Saudi Arabia. There was some code that was leaked that was found on the main page today, saying that there would be a Call of Duty Warzone tournament in June, and then a Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 tournament with $1.8 million in prizing at the end on the 18th. No, what was it? What was the days? Let me just find it here.
I think it was the 15th to the
15th
18th.
15th to the 18th in August. That's pretty cool. I have no idea how that would work, though, because that is decidedly after Champs. That is not at the same time as Champs. Actually, that would bookend the... I just realized that would be before College Football Week 0. That would be like literally days before the first college football games, which is very on brand for the Call of Duty League. But no, I don't know if I don't. Again, we're not going to talk about it a lot because I don't think that someone saying HTML code was on a web page and then it got deleted. That's not really. But this is something we expected, though. This had been one of the things that the Call of Duty League put into that new, not really charter thing, agreement thing with the teams, that other people could host tournaments. That's what we're looking at. And I expected them to do this. It makes too much sense for Activision to pass up the money that would come from this. But at the same time, there's a lot of questions about it, so we're not going to talk about too much because will it be current rosters? Will it be next year's rosters? What would that even look like? I don't know. But that being said, though, I'm excited. If that does happen, I'd be pretty excited for that. Do you have anything you'd like to add to that as well?
Yeah, I'm just curious if it does happen, what does the structure of the tournament look like? Is it just professional CDL teams like we know and love, like Atlanta FaZe and Seattle Surge and those teams? Will it be, I assume that would be the case, but maybe we get some sort of, it's a World Cup, maybe we have an American team, a Canadian team, a French team, a Spanish team, like maybe they would do that. I feel like that would be harder to put the event together if it was that case, just because the North American players would be probably way above whatever team like Germany is throwing out. But yeah, interested to see, would challengers teams be invited to that? Would it be like a glorified pro-am type of event where maybe the CDL teams are all automatically there and then there's some sort of open bracket for challengers teams to make their way in? I don't know. There's obviously a lot of money at stake if that $1.8 million figure is true. So yeah, just curious to see if this event does indeed get confirmed and just how it will look. I think if it's anything different than a typical CDL major, I think that's good. It's a breath of fresh air at a time of the year where we don't usually have competitive COD to watch. We'll continue to monitor that going forward, but yeah, some promising lines of code for sure.
Yes, very promising lines of code. Moving on to the news of to the expected qualifiers. FaZe, of course, winning. They got as expected, but closer than expected, though. They are still leading with the 6.32 expected qualifier wins. Texas at 5.03, Seattle 4.74, Ultra stumbling against that same Surge team. They're down to 4.25, and Sublighter down to 4.2. Again, none of this really matters. because they're all going to be in winner's bracket anyways. They're all going to be in winner's bracket and probably no lower than the fifth seed of any of them. Thieves 3.91. They got 2 wins last week, one against Boston and the other against. They did actually beat, but it was in 5 games. Legion at 3.22 and LAG at 2.71. Miami 2.62. Minnesota 2.21. Carolina 1.89 and Boston 0.93 for expected wins. It's funny because we talked about this the last week. You opened up a 90-point gap in the race to 1580, and then I was monitoring it this week, and literally I think most of my teams, whenever they played your teams, they won. I got another 30 points net last week, so that difference is now a third. And had subliners beaten FaZe, that gap would have been halved. I think there might be a bit of a comeback in that race to 1580. I also like the fact that
I also just wanted to chime in. Sorry. I just wanted to chime in. Yeah, so it was initially 90 points. You're right, which seems like a good bit. But yeah, if you can just shave that down 10 points, 20 points for the next few weeks, like we go into the final major and you're well within striking distance. So yeah, it very likely will be determined by who wins Major 4. I would say for you to pass me, you'd probably need the winner. I think for sure you'd need the winner of Major 4 and maybe the runner-up as well, or maybe at least third place. And then at that point, it's getting really close. Because, I don't think like Boston Breach are getting me anything else. And then I have a couple other teams that are trending towards loser's bracket with Carolina and Rocker, as you see in that expected wins chart. But sorry to interrupt. I don't know if you were going to say anything else in regards to that.
No,
but I think you're live.
Yeah. No, I think so too. It's funny because you were saying about Boston, and I was like, I looked at it. I think like the next 3 teams Boston plays are all my teams. So I'm like farming. It's funny, but it's true though, right? But the thing is, again, this is the trade-off, right? You got Optic and FaZe. They're the biggest bunches of points right now, right? I think the top 2, you're the strongest top 2. I went subliner. I went ultra subliners. Maybe that was the wrong call. We'll have to see. Maybe New York gets their due this time. But I think from bottom 4 on, I think mine are slightly stronger than my bottom 4 are better. I think are a bit better than your bottom 4. You're being carried by the top 2, right? But that's the point, right? Because you get those top 2, you get the major points, right? So that's the thing where it's if I win the major, if it's like something like subliners FaZe or subliners ultra in the final, it's okay. The winner of this maybe wins the whole thing, right? So it's gonna be interesting. It's gonna be really close. But shout out, poor Boston, man. I thought maybe they'd have a chance, but just no. I can't. It's so rough. What do you even do? You just say, this is the position, but see, this is where the teams get dangerous, right? Because this was like Surge years ago, where we're done, there's no hope, but then we're just going to take out FaZe in the second last major or something. What do you even do? This team is chalked. There's like next to no chance of making champs now. What do you even do?
Yeah, I think you just commit to where you are at this point. Like, I think maybe for sure are eliminated for champs at this point, or they are very close. I know their social media team was tweeting out some stuff of, LOL, joke's on you. We're not going to be at champs, but we're going to be grinding the COD alpha when it drops in July or whatever. So, they are, if they're not dead yet, they are close. But I think you just roll with the team that you have right now, and you still try to get qualifier wins. You still try to make a run at Major 4 because there's still a lot of money to be had at that tournament. Maybe they get hot when they show up to wherever the tournament is. I can't remember because this one's not hosted by a team, but you commit to being like the team that can ruin one of these other teams' day. Like, that's what you have to go for. So and maybe, I don't know, you see it with football. I know you like to make football analogies. Like, you want to put on quote unquote good film for next year. If you want to get a starting spot in the league this fall, like maybe if you're on Boston Breach right now and you put together 2 or 3 wins to end the year, like, that could be something. But just going back to the expected wins chart, I think FaZe jumps out as clearly they are the favorite to get the 1 seed at this point, with Optic losing, Ultra losing, Subliners losing to FaZe already. So they look very likely to get the 1 seed. And then we've got a pretty tight cluster between the 2 through 6 seed. Right now, Toronto and New York are lined up for the 4-5 matchup. That would be interesting just considering that most every major we get to at this point, the top four, Optic, Atlanta, Toronto, New York, they're always the 1 through 4 seeds and they never see each other in round one. Where now that some of these top teams have dropped a game, it's more likely that the 4-5 matchup or even the 3-6 matchup might be two of those teams going head-to-head in round one. So that makes for an interesting wrinkle. Another thing I'd like to point out is that line, that 8-seed cutoff line, Miami Heretics, right under that, but they do play LA Gorillas and Minnesota Rocker this week. They could do a lot to help their chances, not only for Major 4 qualifiers, but for qualifying for champs. Some really high leverage games coming this week for them specifically, as well as Carolina and Vegas and those other teams. But Miami Heretics are in an interesting spot, I will say, going into this week. So yeah, that's where I want to leave it for now. I don't know if anything else jumps out to you.
No, I think that's about right. I think it's yeah, that's how I see the board as well. For this week is going to be really important, especially for Miami and LAG. I think, yeah, beating the market and combined model results. So last week a bit rough for both of us. We both went 1-2. I did get LAG versus Thieves. That was very tight though. Boston just decided to do nothing on Sunday, and Miami did not cover the +2.5. Although they were alive, definitely alive in that first hard point, but that's what happens on sub base. You could just fall behind and then get crushed. Minnesota did not do well against Seattle. That was also a Sunday game as well. LA Thieves, though, did beat Boston. They did cover that -1.5, so I guess one of us had to win that one. And then, yeah, again, I love this one. This one's great. I don't know how this happened. But the team that's so bad... Now, I think... Did Boston win that? No, Boston didn't.
They did. They outright won
that's right.
Game 2 6-2 on Invasion. Yeah.
Yes. It's the first time Boston has won an SND in, I don't even know, some insanely long amount of time. But it's funny how we're like, oh, that line's a bit soft. And sure enough, I don't know. I thought that was funny. I'm like, and I even bet that one too. I'm like, yeah, that's a really good line. I'll put something in there. And then, no, that didn't happen. That made me a little sad too. I was in on that one as well. But anyways, moving on. Again, some of these were not so great. Toronto map 1, they did not win map 3. Minnesota map 2. Boston map 3. LAG map 3. LAG +1.5, good. They didn't cover the spread map 1. Miami, they did not do anything. Carolina, although I think they did cover the spread, I think, in that game. I can't remember. Carolina did cover the +1.5, they're not on map 1. Minnesota money line, that didn't happen. Boston, that didn't happen. And FaZe weirdly lost map 1 against Subliners, but Texas did, in fact, win map 2 against, I think it was...
Vegas.
Vegas, yes, although they did eventually lose the series. Match preview, so here we go for this week. Yeah, so the lines... The money lines and stuff are from Bet365, but the spreads are from Bovada because Bet365 is really weird on getting out the spreads, but we just put the spreads in. So they may not match perfectly, but this is the best spreads and information we have now. Friday, match 1, Subliners versus Surge. Subliners -250 in the money line, -1.5, -110. 16.5 point favorites for the Subliners in the hard point, 1.5 round favorites in the search, but that's shaded to +115, and then 1.5 round favorites in the control, and that's also shaded to +115. I like Subliners here. You're ambivalent in this game. The thing for me is, I think the Surge team and the Subliners team, they're both really confusing as to like how do you... Subliners seem to be doing well. Okay, they did beat Toronto and then they swept, I think they swept Minnesota. Okay, but at the same time, that was not a particularly convincing win against Toronto. They could have been 3-0'd in that series very easily. That could have been a 3-0. And then they come back and win it 5-3, 3-2. That was a little unconvincing. They struggled in the major. I think they lost to Subliners in the major as well. That eliminated them as well. I don't know. Subliners seem to be a little better. My model seems to be picking up on them a little bit better. My model's still a little skeptical on Surge. What do you think on this? Are you on Surge is doing well, or do you think maybe Surge is what do you think about this?
It's tricky. This one is a stay away for me, but I would lean with you on New York being the play here, most of that predicated on control being a pretty reliable game mode for New York. Now, I do know New York, they lost control on Invasion against Carolina, but then they won control against FaZe on Karachi, which FaZe is by far the best control team, so taking them out on a map like Karachi where it's not quite as like just defensive favored, that was an impressive control win. So a little bit mixed results there, but I think New York should have the advantage on any control map that they square up on. So if the vetoes go as planned, I think New York is comfortably a map 3 favorite. And then I think the other two modes could very well split. I think Hardpoint and Search between these two teams is very close. So it's one of those classic, like, map 3 probably decides it, and I do have a strong lean on New York there. So that's where I'm at for now. I will say both of these teams, in terms of what they did last week, I would say both impressed. I know Surge did almost get swept, but to beat Ultra, if you just said Seattle Surge on Friday will beat Ultra 3-2, I would say that's an impressive result. And then you look at the maps, some were close, but they outscored them in Search and Destroy rounds. They outscored them in Hardpoint, technically. It was pretty close, but still, Surge beat Ultra and then came out and swept Minnesota. There was one close map, a round 11 Search, but otherwise, all Seattle Surge. Yeah, they look okay. New York almost took out FaZe. That would have been huge for them. Game 4 was an 8-point loss, so that stings quite a bit. And then they had a round 11 loss and a round 10 loss in Search. So they were right on the doorstep of beating Atlanta. And then the Carolina series for New York was interesting, like dominant, hard point. Search was a little bit of a mixed bag. And like I said before, the control did not go their way. So, overall, these teams are both kind of trending in the same direction. I do still think New York are a cut above. And I just think at the end of the day, I feel good about their control getting them over the finish line. I lean subliners here, probably a 3-1 victory. But Seattle Surge, if they look like what they looked like last week, this could for sure go to a Game 5 and maybe Surge take it. That's where I'm at on this one.
Yeah, that -1.5 is a little tempting. It's going to be like one of those where you're going to sit here and you're going to be like, oh, I should have taken it's so obvious I should have done that, right? That's going to be it's either going to be like, oh, of course Subliners are going to win 3-1, or, oh, of course it was going to go to a Game 5, right? I don't know. I do like Subliners in the hardpoint. And I know for a 3-1, that's the most important piece. If you like them in hard points, I think that -1.5 of basically winning 2 hard points and then winning a search or a thing is pretty good, I think. That's, I think, a decent play there as well. Friday, match 2, Minnesota versus Miami. This is actually a race to 1580 match. Miami -163 on the money line, -1.5 plus 150. -8.5. Miami is weirdly an 8.5 point favorite in the hard point, 1.5 round favorite in the search, and then 1.5 round underdog in the control, but shaded to -240 there. I'm a little lower on Miami money line, not a lot lower. I kind of like them in map 2 more than map 1. I definitely don't like them in map 3. I like Minnesota map 3, but I think that's really just because Minnesota beat Boston so heavily in that map 3 that I think that's the only reason I do like that. I don't know. This is a stay away from me. I don't really have I don't really like any of the lines here. Miami is just, they could be either good or really bad on any given day, and I just don't want to touch that. In Minnesota, I think as well, this is a stay away from me. What about you?
Have some interest in Miami in this series. I think it's important. I just want to throw out their series last week versus Optic. They had the substitute player come in, Purge, who does not speak Spanish. So for their comms, we got the listen in on Miami Heretics, and they were talking in English, which I probably should have thought about that last week. I just assumed, I don't know, that they would all speak Spanish and Purge would just not talk. But yeah, they all spoke English. I just think that whole dynamic with that team gets thrown off if all of a sudden you're communicating in not your native language because you have this player just coming in for a weekend. The whole thing felt weird. So yeah, their series last week versus Optic was bad. Like they lost easily in hardpoint. a round 8 loss in search and then swept on invasion control. Like, it wasn't pretty, but I still input the data and run the numbers, and I still see a little bit of value on Miami Heretics. So what does that say about Minnesota Rocker? Not good things, which I don't like as a Rocker fan. But yeah, I think Miami Search and Destroy is for sure playable. I actually think my control numbers are maybe a touch low on Heretics. Just going through how the vetoes might play out, I really think it's probably close to a 50-50 on map 3. So yeah, the only side I can be talked into is Heretics. If you want to take the -1.5 at +150, even though my numbers say it's a little low, I'm okay with that. I would much prefer that than the Minnesota +1.5 at a giant number, or Minnesota money line. Like, I just feel good about Miami. I think last week was whatever. And you look at Minnesota last week, yeah, they barely beat Boston. It takes them around. They lose search and destroy rounds 8-11, but somehow split the 2 games. Hardpoint, they did bank Hardpoint, which we'll get to Boston in a match or two. But Hardpoint looked great against this new Boston team, but that might be more of a Boston are taking a step back in that game mode. And then, yeah, like you show up to the Seattle series and you lose the round 11 search, but the other 2 maps, not even close. I think Minnesota are starting to separate themselves from that Seattle Surge, Royal Ravens, LA Thieves tier of teams that are likely to make champs, and they're going the wrong way. Yeah, for me, it's Miami in this spot. I don't love it, but it's definitely the side I prefer.
I do tend to agree on that. I don't love that line. I don't know. I'll have to think about it. Let's see. I think if I did have to play it, I'd play it at Miami, but it's so ugly. I can't. It's so hard to get behind it. You can't. It's hard to be like, yeah, that's better. I don't know. Moving on to the last match on Friday, I'll blow out FaZe versus Ravens. Again, massive price on FaZe. -1,200 on the money line. -2.5 +225. 50.5 point favorites in the hard point. 1.5 round favorites in the search. And then 1.5 round favorites in the control. And yeah. I weirdly like FaZe. I don't know. It's weird. I liked FaZe against subliners, the -1.5, and they let me down. I like FaZe -2.5 this week. They'll probably let me down again as well. I don't know. This FaZe team is probably one of the best teams in the game. They're definitely one of the best teams in the game. I feel like they're massively overvaluing the betting line sometimes. I don't know what to make of this Carolina team. I think this Carolina team is like, they're not bad. They're just like an outside. They're just outside of the top there, but it's just, I don't know. I can never really get behind this team. I feel like I can't just be like, oh yeah, this team, 100%, right? Like, it's a lot harder for me to get behind this team, and yeah. But I'll take FaZe -2.5 here. What about you? What do you think?
Yeah, last week was interesting for Ravens. They lose both series, one to LAG, one to New York, both in a game 5. But yeah, just inconsistent results across the board. Their search was really bad outside of a 6-0 win against subliners. They lost 6-3 to subliners and then 6-2, 6-2 to LA Gorillas, who are not a very good search team. So yeah, the controls, they got both of those, so that was nice to see. But the issue, like, if Carolina is going to bank on their control, which I think is solid, and I think their hard point is also decent, the issue is you're going up against FaZe, who are by far the kings of control. And I'd feel better about Ravens if, like, they had some maps where they were just absolutely dominant in, but they're more of just a solid across-the-board team when it comes to the whole map set, specifically in control, too. So it just becomes harder to find, okay, what map could Ravens beat FaZe on if the veto process gets a little weird? Because FaZe at this point in the year, I do think that is worth monitoring, is like, FaZe is fine. Like, they can play less than ideal map sets the rest of the way just to get reps on maps that they're not playing a lot or they don't have a good record on, because they are a lock for champs. They're likely to win these series anyway. So FaZe might play the veto process thing differently as we approach the end of the year, just to see what they have on some other maps. But the thing is, like, Carolina doesn't have those like maps that they can just bank on of, if we get to play this hard point or this search, like, we are the favorite team. So that's the iffy thing with Carolina. I think they're a good team. They are a step above those bottom of the barrel teams. I think their outlook for champs is good, but I just don't think they match up well against these top teams, just because they're just so average everywhere, if that makes sense. That's where I lean with this. Yeah. I think FaZe are heavy favorites, as they should be, but the prices on FaZe are just too high for me to take them in this series.
Yeah, I agree with that. Saturday, match 1, Surge versus Breach. And now we've finally gotten to Breach now. Surge minus 334 on the money line at minus 1.5, minus 120. 34.5 point favorite in the hard point, 1.5 round favorite in the search, and then 1.5 round favorite in the control, but that is shaded to plus 165 there. I weirdly like Boston here, but on one hand, it's like, I know my model's going to say bet on Boston, but I'm going to do it and I'm going to instantly regret it. I'm like, I know this will happen. It's hard for me to say, yeah, let's bet on Boston. Yeah, like, again, are we doing okay? Yeah, we covered Boston plus 1.5 against Minnesota. Yeah, and then they got hammered by Thieves. Now, should they have gotten hammered by Thieves? It was a tad closer than expected. It was a tad closer than a 3-0, obviously, but I don't know. It's really hard to say, yeah, let's bet on Boston. Yeah, it's so hard. It's really hard to say, let's do this again, but the thing is, at a certain point, teams that are doomed just come up and win random games. And I don't know, what are your thoughts on this? Are you with me on, are we doing this one more time, or are we gonna not do this? What do you think?
How should I word this? I would be totally okay if you were in on Boston. It's weird, though, because, like, our models are very aligned on this match, which I think is a good thing in general when our models are this in lockstep. Like, we think Boston are undervalued hardpoint and control, and maybe a touch overvalued in search. But just based on what this team did last week with their new lineup, Major Maniac comes in, the whole thinking is, okay, he should boost their search and destroy, which I think he did. They won 1 out of 3, but their round count was, I believe, 15 and 14, so they very well could have been 2 and 1. A lot of that is predicated on a round 11 loss to Minnesota. They go to round 10 against LA Thieves, who are a pretty darn good search team, so just getting that to round 10 is like a step in the right direction. They had a 6-2 dominant win versus Rocker. Their search looks better, and that was the big bugaboo with this team, was like, they cannot win search and destroys. Now they've shown that, like, they can for sure compete, at least through 3 search and destroy games. On the flip side, the thing I worried about last week was, like, their hardpoint and their control, which have been pretty solid. Like, I don't want to say solid, but their hardpoint and control has been, like, maybe surprisingly good throughout the year. And now you bring in Major Maniac, and we'll see if that stays the same. Their hardpoint, they did not win any of their hardpoints. They got beat down pretty easily in all of them. The control, they did win the control versus Minnesota, but then turned around and lost to LA Thieves. So, I don't know. Boston, I need one more week of data to figure out how I feel about Boston. But I think just trends-wise, Seattle Surge are this middle-of-the-pack team that is trending up based on what they did last week, beating Toronto, sweeping Rocker. And Boston are still like, oh yeah, they're still the worst team. So I think it's a good time to buy Boston, but you could have made that argument, like, throughout the year, and it never was. So it's a tricky spot, but I do think if you're going to make me pick a side with the market in mind, I would lean Boston. So, famous last words, but I think this is one that could get interesting.
Yeah, I think, unfortunately for you, this would help you if you got this win. That would be a +1 for you in the race to 1580. But yeah, if you could steal it again, the thing is that at some point Boston will win a game, probably. I don't think as a franchise eventually they'll win a game. Will this team win a game? Probably, but there's not any more games left. This isn't like the NHL where every couple weeks you're just like, yeah, no one cares about this game, so you're playing like your third string goalie or something. Like at some point they're gonna play. They may not win a game, but they probably will. So I don't know. It's your probability has Boston at what, .9 wins. So theoretically, cumulatively, they get almost one win.
Yeah, no,
So
if you were to ask me right now, like, how many wins do Boston get in the qualifiers? Knowing that they're already 0-2, I say they go 1-6. I think they have winnable games. They play Surge. They also have some games that they're just, like, straight up not going to win. I think they play FaZe and Optic, and those are just automatic L's. But yeah, their other three, I think, are winnable, and I think they can get one of those wins. This is maybe one of the trickier ones they have left of those three, but I just think Surge are this team that they go hot, they go a little cold at times, and I think Boston they're still knocking on the door. They just got to break it down, and I think maybe they do it in this match, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, we'll have to see. Moving on, Saturday match 2, Subliners versus Legion. Subliners minus 500 on the money line, minus 1.5, minus 188. 25.5 point favorites in the hard point, 1.5 round favorites in the search, and then 1.5 round favorites in the control. Actually, both of us are just pretty low on subliners there. We're high on Vegas, especially in the hard point, especially in the plus 1.5, and I'm a little on the money line. You're less so on the money line. We're not so much on the search and the control, but like we really seem to like Legion hardpoint. And Legion is again one of these teams that it's so hard to place, man. They'll look horrible, right? This is a team that got rid of Purge, lost 12 straight games. Then they replaced Purge, or then they put a seam in, then they replaced a seam with, what was it, Geo or no?
Yeah, Geo came in. Oh, Johnny is now in the lineup.
Oh, Johnny, that's who it was.
Been,
yes. Yeah. They replace Asim with Ojani. They lose the last game of the qualifier, go into the major, lose that game as well, which is funny because we outlined that exact scenario in our podcast. We're like, what does Vegas do if that happens to them? And we're like, well, I guess we're just going to continue on. And sure enough, they continue on, and then they beat the team that just won the major. Amazing. Just, you can't write this stuff. Yeah, I think Legion is actually undervalued here. I think Subliners is a good team, but I think Legion is good. It's really hard to peg this team. But earlier in the year, when this team was doing well, they were doing really well, right? I think it's hard to say that obviously Subliners are a better team, but like when you're looking at some of these lines, you're looking at 25.5. That's like that's kind of low, but they could definitely cover that. They don't need to win a game to cover 25.5. Plus 1.5, plus 137, that's a bit much considering the fact that if they get to a game 4, they might have a really good matchup there. Yeah, I like Legion here. What are your thoughts on this one?
I agree completely. Another one where our models look pretty similar. You much more aggressive on Vegas to win hardpoint, which I don't hate, but yeah, like I think these teams are roughly equal in hardpoint. Both were fantastic in hardpoint last week. Vegas do get swept by Ultra, but that hardpoint was 12 points on Karachi, which is a map that Toronto Ultra have been very good on throughout the year. To keep it that close is impressive. And then, yeah, they turn around on Sunday in a match that I think the desk said 1% of pick'ems had Vegas beating Optic, and they go out and they do it. And it's a 3-2, which looks very close, but at the end of the day, like, Vegas owned that series. They crushed Optic on sub-base hardpoint, which was Optic's first loss on sub-base all year. They beat them by 121. That was a shock. And that was a good map for Vegas going into that game. But to beat them by that much is notable. Optic get a win, a round 11 win on Search. Like, that very easily could have gone to Vegas. Have a weird control win on High Rise. That very easily could have gone to Optic. So a couple close ones there. Optic clutch up on Vista Hardpoint. That was a bit of a sweat. If I remember correctly, like, Kenny was alive in P1 at the end of the game. And had he died, Vegas would have got not enough time. They were still down by 32 points, or 42 points. But it would have gotten really close had they gotten the rest of that hill and then rotated out to the next. And then, yeah, Vegas obviously closed it out 6-3 on game 5. I was just super impressed with Vegas. New York was also impressive. Like, you look at New York's games, they held their own versus Atlanta. They very easily could have won that series. And then the Carolina one was a 3-2 victory, but I would say a comfortable win when you look at just the totals for each game mode. So both teams, again, like some other matches we've talked about, both teams trending up for sure. But I just look at how the vetoes play out. I think these teams are likely to split hard points. So if you're giving me Vegas plus 150 in map 1, assuming that map 1 and map 4 are both about 50-50 matchups, I'm just going to take the team that's plus 150. So that I like. The search and the control, I'm a little iffy on with them, but they are an underdog that is well equipped to at least push it to a game 5, just based on how good they are at hardpoint, if they can get both of those coin flips to go their way. Or maybe they get a search win unexpectedly in map 2. So yeah, all roads lead to Vegas for me in this one. I do really like them, but it is a little scary just knowing that New York's hardpoint does look quite a bit better as well. An interesting game to monitor. This is for sure one I'm going to watch going into this weekend, but yeah, a lot to be figured out for sure.
Agreed. Saturday, match 3, Thieves versus Ravens. Thieves minus 200 the money line at minus 1.5 plus 125. 16.5 point favorites in the hard point for Thieves. 1.5 round favorites in the search, but is shaded to plus 100. And then 1.5 round underdogs in the control, but that is shaded to minus 225. I like Carolina. My model just generally hates Thieves. I don't understand it, but your model also doesn't like Thieves here either. I also don't know what to make of Thieves. I don't think they're good, but I don't think they're bad. But Carolina is okay. It's very weird. This year has been very weird for some weird results where like people are like, oh, Thieves swept Boston. Obviously, Thieves are good and Boston are bad. But I'm like, I don't know. Obviously, Boston's not good, but I don't think Boston is that bad. I don't think Thieves are that good. But then you see a result like this and people are like, okay, of course, Thieves should be massive favorites against Carolina, but at the time, then you get stuff like this, right? So I don't know. If I had to take a pick here, I'd pick Carolina. I don't love it, but I don't know. I can't remember wrap my head around this Thieves team. They keep hurting me. So I don't know. I bet on them, they lose. I bet against them, they win. I don't know. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, Thieves are an interesting team. I would call them the 5th best team. I know there's a debate right now of is that Surge, is that Thieves, is that somebody else? I would say it's Thieves. The thing that makes me a little uneasy about LA Thieves is just a lot of their success is based on search and destroy success. And as we know, that game mode is the flukiest, I don't know, the most random results can come from search and destroy. Underdogs can win in that game mode relatively frequently. So to have that as like the game mode you're banking on gets a little scary at times. Like just last week, like if LA Thieves don't win the game 1 hardpoint versus LA Gorillas, like, and that was a 7-point game on Karachi, like LAG, it looks like they pull out a 3-1 victory, and we're talking about LA Gorillas in a completely different way heading into this week. But LA Thieves good enough to get that hard point win, just barely, and then dominant in search and destroy, 6-3, 6-1. And then we talked about their match versus Boston, pretty comfortable across the board, but it's Boston. Hopefully it should be. Carolina, a weird week, again, with the 2 losses, but game 5s in both. I agree with you. I think Carolina is my preferred side. My model seems to point that direction too. But at the end of the day, it is a stay away. I do think Carolina, just based on what they've done in hardpoint lately, I would push my hardpoint projection for them down a little bit. And I already don't really see value on Carolina map 2 or map 3. So I think market is pretty much spot on in this match. I think LA Thieves should be a favorite, but not an overwhelming favorite. And at minus 200, that's the definition of that sort of team. Yeah, I expect an LA Thieves probably 3-2 victory, as they do quite often. But yeah, a Carolina 3-1 is definitely in the cards if LA Thieves come out a little shaky in search unexpectedly, or if they just fall flat in hardpoint or something like that. Yeah, I lean Carolina with the prices, but I do ultimately think LA Thieves get this done.
Yeah, I agree with that. Moving on, Saturday match 4, Miami versus LAG. Miami at minus 200 on the money line, minus 1.5 plus 110, 25.5 point favorites in the hard point, 1.5 round favorites in the search, and then 1.5 round favorites in the control. But the search is shaded to plus 125, and the control spread is shaded to plus 190. I like LAG here. I actually love LAG here. I don't know why Miami is the favorite. Again, this is the weird thing where it's like on one hand it's oh okay, they underperformed last week because of the language barrier. But at the same time, but LAG is actually good though. I think they did struggle against LA Thieves, but they did go down 0-2, right? If they'd not gone down 0-2, they could have won that series easier, right? I don't know. And then they did come back and then they won. No, did they played? Yeah, who they play on?
They beat
Who do they play on
Carolina in a
Sunday?
game 5, and then they lost to LA Thieves the
Oh,
next
on
day.
Saturday. That's right. They beat Carolina on Saturday. Yeah, they did some stuff last week. I'm really skeptical as to why this Miami team is so much favored in this match. 25.5 seems pretty high number for the hard point as well. You seem to like Miami a tad more than me. Do you see a benefit in betting in Miami here, or are you just going to stay away from this one?
No, this one's tricky. LA Gorilla's hard point last week, which has been a big issue for them on the season, looked pretty good. They split 4 hard point matches. One of those, like I said before, was a 7-point loss to LA Thieves, who aren't pushovers at all in hard point. Yeah, I don't know. It was a solid hard point week for them. Search was a split. Like, they won both searches versus Ravens, lost both versus Thieves. That kind of lines up with what you think about those teams. We know Thieves are a good search team. We know Ravens are a little shaky there. But yeah, I think if you're LA Gorillas, you'll take 1-1 after those 2 matches. So again, it all points back to what do you take from Miami's match last week? And I don't really take much of it at all. So that's driving some of my numbers down on Miami, actually, just based on what I input last week. And it still sees a sliver of value on Heretic. So if you're going to make me pick, I will side with Miami, but I am not confident at all in that price. Yeah, I just think this one's a stay away for me, but this one is obviously a huge leverage game for both teams. Both teams hovering around that 8 seed for Major 4 and the 8 seed for Champ. So this is a huge one, for sure one to watch, but I do give Miami just a slight lean. But I get where you're coming from on LA Gorillas, just based on what they did last week. It was pretty good. And we've seen them from time to time come out and surprise everybody, much like Vegas did last week. So Miami are just that solid team across the board. Miami are built a lot like Ravens, I would say, where they match up well against this type of team. But LA Gorillas have the firepower to maybe get a bigger upset than we might think. So that's usually where I'm trying to pivot with LA Gorillas, is if their price is maybe down because they haven't been winning lately, take them as a big underdog against a good team, and maybe they'll cover. That's where I lean nothing in this game, but if I had to pick, I would go with Miami. So tricky spot, but a good match. It should be a good match.
Yeah, it should be a good match. I'm excited to see that one as well. Sunday, not Miami, LAG for some reason getting a double game last week, a Friday, Saturday, back-to-back games. Now they get a Saturday to Sunday back-to-back games. Poor LAG. I don't know what they did to make the schedule makers mad at them, but it was clearly something. I don't know what it was. FaZe minus 2,000 on the money line, minus 2.5 plus 100. 55.5 point favorites in the hard point, 1.5 round favorites in the search, and then 1.5 round favorites in the control. Yeah, you're not getting much disagreement from me on this one. I kind of think. Yeah, I don't hate LAG in the control, as in by the spread, not to win the control. To clear, but the search, I like FaZe better in the search, and I like FaZe better in the control as well. But not. I think LAG has a shot in the hard point, but not a great shot though, but a shot. I I think this is unbettable. Maybe the minus 2.5, but you're just relying on FaZe to just start destroying teams again. And they do that, but I think sometimes they also just don't care, right? What's the point in getting a 3-0? You don't need it, right? You just get the 3-1, right? Oh, what's your take on this one? Do you like the minus 2.5?
I do. So it's funny, I just talked about how LA Gorillas, I think, are better set up to cover big spreads against elite teams. I make an exception against FaZe. I think Atlanta are way, way ahead of them. I'm totally okay taking Atlanta minus 2.5 even, but the one thing that scares me, and let's not forget this match happened a couple months ago, or maybe it was January at this point, and LA Gorillas were like 16-1 to win the series, and they did. I think a lot of that was Atlanta playing some maps that they wanted some more experience on, and it did not go their way, and they lost the series, and Atlanta lost a series. Not a big deal for them. For LA Gorillas, that was huge. That has kept them in the hunt for champs. The one thing I worry about now is just I don't think FaZe are playing sub-base hardpoint anymore. They have not played it since, I think, March 17th. That's been one map for FaZe that's been a clear weakness. I believe they've lost it to LA Gorillas maybe once or twice. They've committed to, all right, we're straight up not going to play that map. So if you just remove that from Atlanta FaZe's map pool, FaZe look obviously very good. So I don't know, maybe we get a weird control map. Like I know LA Gorillas would probably want to play high-rise control, but the issue is FaZe are just good at every control map, so it might not matter. Search could get fluky, obviously. That's always the game mode that's up in the air the most, but at the end of the day, I just think FaZe are on a mission to bounce back from Major 3. Somewhat disappointing third-place finish. They come out last week. They don't cover the spread versus New York, but at the end of the day, they get it done. It's tough to make an argument for LA Gorillas other than Atlanta FaZe vetoes some maps that they're good at just because they want to get experience on other maps. That's the one angle you have to worry about, but at the end of the day, I just think FaZe are just so much better. I lean Atlanta, but I don't know. Maybe Gorillas pull out a crazy one again. Who knows?
Yeah. It's one of the ones where I'm staying away from it because there is that chance, right? And LEG has been up on the uptrend. I don't know. I want to stay away from it from that reason, but I can understand. The thing is, it's like at some point you're just like, okay, FaZe minus 2.5, whatever they lose, they win, whatever, it doesn't matter. You're just like, I'm putting it on here. I don't care. I think there's a better chance, and then you can know that your bet is just dead, right? This is not one of those. It's not gonna be an excruciating bets where it's you put something on there, and 3 hours later you're gonna know in 10 minutes. Okay, the bet's just dead, right? That's it. So it's one of those. Moving on, Sunday match 2, Ultra versus Heretics. Ultra minus 900 on the money line, minus 2.5 plus 125, 40.5 point favorite in the hard point, 1.5 round favorite in the search, 1.5 round favorite in the control. I kind of like Miami. Maybe not to win per se, but to cover the plus 2.5. Again, this is just a weird one with Miami. It's just, I don't know. I'm staying away from this one. This is one of the ones where I usually stay away from a lot of Ultra games, but I don't see a lot of value in Ultra. This is another example of not finding value in Ultra. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, this one, Toronto, a justified gigantic favorite, but I do think Miami could take that map 2 search, and that your numbers seem to indicate that too. You have Heretics favored in map 2. I'm not quite there, but I'm close to a 50-50 in that mode. So when you look at prices, it's like Miami map 2 at plus 175. That sounds good. Or would you rather have Miami to cover 2.5 at minus 175? I'm not so sure about Miami in hardpoint or control. I'm right in line with market on both of those. So at the end of the day, I'll just take the plus 175 in map 2 specifically and be like, that's how they get it to the map 4 is search and destroy. Yeah, Toronto weirdly, I don't know. The reverse sweep to Seattle is a bit of a concern. And then they turn around and play Vegas, sweep them. But again, hardpoint was a little closer than you'd like it to be. Toronto are just in this weird spot where they're going to win a lot of series. They're going to make champs. They're going to probably finish top 4. But they're just showing some signs of weakness here and there. And I think a team like Miami is good enough to maybe pull out a map against them. That's the lean here for me is Miami. But I don't love it, but it's definitely the side I prefer. I just think, again, last week Miami, throw away the results. I think we'll get a much better Miami team this week. That's where I lean, but At the end of the day, it's a Toronto 3-1. Like, this just screams classic Ultra 3-1, but if that's the case, Miami cover. Miami.
Yeah. Sunday, match 3, Optic versus Minnesota. Optic minus 900 the money line, minus 2.5 plus 150, 44.5 point favorites in the hard point, 1.5 round favorites in the search, and then 1.5 round favorites in the control as well. I like Texas minus 2.5 just a little bit. Not a lot, just a little bit. Basically to book in most things, except I like Texas in the control. Yeah, it's about even for me. I don't really see a lot of value here. Maybe you take something on the Texas minus 2.5. Other than that, don't really like anything else here. Do you see anything you like here, or is this kind of a pass for you?
No, this is Optic or nothing. I know Optic dropped that series against Vegas. That was a huge surprise. Vegas were justified favorites. It was not fluky whatsoever. You look at Optic versus Miami, again, that's the match that I just want to throw out. Optic looked dominant, but again, Miami were not at full strength. So part of that is baked into this, but at the end of the day, Minnesota just look bad. Good on them for beating Boston. They are clearly a step above Breach, but I don't even know about that because it was a Game 5, Round 11. But anytime they've squared up against Breach, it's been good results. That's one team they've been able to take out, but anybody else, Minnesota is struggling. I just worry about their outlook going forward. I think they're looking at losers bracket. At this point in the qualifier stage, it looks like they're trending that way. Just with how the teams around them have been looking, like I'd much prefer to be Miami. I'd much prefer to be Vegas, right? Like last week was not good for Minnesota despite picking up a win. So I worry about them. This new lineup, right, it's been okay, but they've shown better throughout the year. Like early part of the year, I think Minnesota was solid, and then they've just slowly faded out. And Optic right now, I think, are a good candidate to bounce back from a weird week. So for me, it's Optic or nothing in this one.
Yeah, I agree with that assessment as well. And yeah, beating the market in the combined model plays. So for our picks this week, I've got 8 plus 1.5 versus Miami, Legion plus 1.5 versus the Subliners. Can't wait for that one to backfire horribly on me. And FaZe minus 2.5 versus Carolina. You're going the other FaZe game, FaZe minus 2.5 versus LAG. You've got Optic minus 2.5 plus 150 versus Minnesota, and you have Legion map 1 plus 150 versus the Subliners. And our combined model plays, we like the Subliners minus 1.5 in map 3 against the Surge, Minnesota map 3, Miami map 2, Atlanta FaZe minus 2.5 there against Carolina there on Friday. Boston, we're doing this again. We're going to step on that rake one more time. Boston plus 1.5, map 1, map 3 against Surge. Legion, money line plus 1.5, map 1. Carolina, money line plus 1.5, map 1. LAG, map 3. FaZe, the full package. Whatever, we're just going to squeeze that orange. Every last little drop of value out of that orange. Miami money line plus 2.5 map 2 there against Ultra, and Optic minus 2.5 map 2 money line as well. That is it for us this week. This is coming to you on, actually today is Tuesday. You'll see this on Wednesday, just a few hours from now, which we're recording this Tuesday night. Next week we will be recording Wednesday to be released on Thursday, and that's basically, there's 2 more left. There's this next week, and then the week after that, and that's the last qualifying one. All that's left is the major, and then champs, and then a theoretical World Series or World Cup of Esports, or whatever it's called. I'm not sure. Whatever, the Saudi thing. That might be the last episode of the season. We'll have to see. Other than that, we will see you guys next week. Have a good week, everybody.